Hi everyone, it's Kate. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are launching a new series on this channel called Just a Tip Tuesday, which is definitely the euphemism it sounds like, but I feel like it goes really well with the Only Plans name, so we're going to run with it. The purpose, though, of this series is to show you how to do a few things here and there with your stickers. So whether it is designing stickers for yourself in Silhouette Studio or Adobe Illustrator or the like, whether it's printing and cutting printable files from my shop, which is what we're starting with today. Some of it will be geared towards the end user and some will be geared towards actual sticker shop owners or people who want to design stickers. But I just thought it would be a fun way to show you guys a few tips and tricks and chat about things that I've figured out along the way, because everything that I am doing is self-taught. So disclaimer, if you see me doing things that are not quote unquote proper graphic designer or program specific processes, just know that it is because I am all self-taught. And if you know a better way of doing something than I show you how to do, drop it in the comments. If you're watching during the premiere and you're in the chat with me, drop it there as well. Let's all learn from each other. I have always believed that if we work together and share the tips and tricks that we learn along the way, we will all be better off. Our secret ingredients are in our creativity, not necessarily in the programs we use or the sticker paper we use and that kind of thing. So I'm an open book. If you have any questions about anything that you see in my shop or see me using, let me know anytime. I will be happy to share. Today, we're going to start with printables. So my shop is both a physical product and printable shop. Everything I offer is available in both. Hold on, let's address that noise you just heard. That is a French bulldog snoring. There are 3 under my desk right now. You're gonna hear them a lot. If you're not new here, you're probably very familiar with this already. If you are new here, welcome. I have, as of last week, 3 French bulldogs. That's a whole story. We'll talk about that another time. But they are snorers and snorters and make a lot of different noises that add a lovely soundtrack to my videos. And there's nothing I can do about it. So they are here to stay. So as I was saying, everything I offer comes in both physical, like mailed product, and printables. And the printables are available both with Silhouette ready files and Cricut ready files. Having said that, some of the older stuff is not fully available for Cricut, but certainly can be upon request. And I am working on moving everything over and getting it available in both formats. So we're going to go over both today, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to use my printables in both programs. So first step, you need to access your files. So I'm going to use this file here on my desktop as an example. Ignore all of this stuff on my desktop, please. I have not cleaned it off in many, many months. When you purchase a printable file from me, you get a PDF that looks like this. It has a picture of whatever you have bought in it. And then in big letters, it says, click here to download your files. And if you do that, you get a pop-up that says, do you want to open it? I'm going to say yes. And it's going to take me straight to the Google Drive. Now, you can ignore this because it is just a temporary file that shouldn't be there. What you get in these folders is a folder called PNG Cricut, one called PNG Silhouette, and then the printable cut files. We're going to go ahead and download this whole file, or folder rather. While we wait for that to download, I'll explain a little bit what these are. So the Cricut files, that's all you need for Cricut. You can open those, go to town. It's got all of the information that you need. The Silhouette files, you'll need both of these. So these are the PNGs for them, and then the printable cut files that are in here are the Studio cut files, or Studio 3 cut files rather. So in here, you've got all the files that we saw in the Google Drive, and we're gonna start with the Silhouette ones. So what you get with these is basically an empty cut file and the PNGs that need to go with it in order to print and cut them. The reason that I do that is is just that for things like sticker buffets and weekly kits and all of that stuff, the files are the same, like the formats are the same each time. So rather than take the time to plug the PNGs into Silhouette and save with the individual cut files, my kits are very like print what you want and leave what you don't. So the cut files are empty. It means you can reuse the same cut files over and over again with different sticker buffets, unless obviously there's a change to the design. So it's very easy. What we're going to do is just open one of the cut files here. So let's open SB1. We're going to give it a minute because my computer is exceedingly slow sometimes at opening Silhouette Studio.
2,000 years later.
All right, so when that opens, you will see this here. This is the cut file for sheet number 1. Now, what I do first is just make sure that it's all selected and grouped, which is going to make it easier. So, oh, that's not grouped. Hold on, that is group. So we've grouped them now, and then what we're going to do, I'm just going to move this over to the side for a minute, and I'm going to go back here to the PNG Silhouette file. And then all of these are just the images that you need. So I'm just going to drag this one in and drop it there. All I have to do, because this is already centered on the page, all I have to do is hit this center button up here, and it's going to go over on top of it. Now, if you want to see exactly where it lines up, all you need to do is make sure that that top one is selected, and then come up here and click send to back. And you will have to zoom in a little bit to see, but you can see on here that they are lined up, and the outer pop cut line is around the outside of it. So that's literally all it takes to get these files into Silhouette Studio. The only part that changes is the actual like registration marks and setup of the page. And that's another reason that I do them this way, because depending on the cutter you use, depending on whether or not you're using a feeder or do you use cutting mats, or are you cutting matless, all of that will impact how you set up your sheet. So I used to print with mats and could get 2 relatively large sheets on one piece of sticker paper. That's because my machines tend to like the narrowest margins possible. But anybody who has a Silhouette knows that that is not always the case. And each Silhouette is different and demands special handling. So because of that, I don't want to set up a 2 of these like size sheets on a page with margins that you may not be able to use. So I leave it way more up to you to be able to customize. And all you need to do that is come over here. So mine is set to the auto sheet feeder because I do have one, but I am going to change that for this purpose to manual, which is going to add the mat. You could then take off the mat if you don't use it, but I'm going to leave it on because I think that most people do tend to use the mats. Removing it or using the sheet feeder, the process of printing and cutting is basically the same, but if you'll notice, when I switch from manual to sheet feeder, it brings this bottom margin up. So watch that bottom margin. If I change it back to manual, it pops down. And that's because when you use the feeder or you're cutting matless in general, it needs to have that bottom margin a little bit higher so that it's not rolling right out of the rollers when it registers. So that will all impact how you set up your page. I do sometimes check here, double click, like just to make sure it's on letter, because sometimes it'll say letter and it's not actually. That's just another lovely Silhouette oddity. Once you have that all set to the way that you want it, you can come over here to the registration marks panel and then choose how you want it set up. So I tend to leave mine at 0.394 and 0.5. This is totally a personal preference and based on how your cutter cuts best. I also tend to change the inset when I'm cutting with a mat from 0.625 to 0.375 because I want to maximize the space on the page. editing Kate here. I definitely meant to put those the other way around, 0.375 for the length and 0.394 for the inset, and you can see that the inset did correct itself there. However, like I said, they don't all like reading those registration marks when they're so high up on the page, so you may want to leave yours. I'm going to put mine back to 0.625 today because I want to show you that you can still get 2 sheets this size on a canvas with these margins. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this and I'm going to say Command G or Control G to group, and I'm just going to move that up to the top of the page, and then I'm going to come back. We can actually pull in this one here, so we'll pull that in, and then we will go over to our printable cut files and open SB2. Now that opens much the same way as SB1 did, and you can see there is your cut file. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to group this, Command or Control G again, and then I'm going to Command or Control C to copy, and then I'm going to bring it over here, and I'm just going to right click and say paste, and then put this down here. Now, you don't have to position this exactly where you want it, and in fact, I wouldn't do that first off because it's going to be a lot easier to do once you have it centered with this. And the easiest way to do that, if it's not already centered on the page, is to select that and then shift and select this. And then you want to hit this bullseye looking button here that says center. So this is going to center to the page. This is just going to center the 2 things that you have selected. So go ahead and click that. It's going to make them meet in the middle. That's fine. I'm going to click Control G again, or Command G on a Mac, so that they're grouped, and then I'm going to bring them down here together. So now what we have is 2 sheets. There's the snoring, 2 sheets lined up with their cut lines, and it fits perfectly. To fully center it on the page, all you need to do is you can like select both of these and then go up here and line them up. That way, like I could click this button to align them in the center. They basically are, so it's not going to move very much. And then what I can do is just select them both again and hit this center to page button. And that's just going to move it down to the middle of the page based on the margins. Actually, it's not going to do it based on the margins. It's just going to do it based on the page. So that is something else to keep in mind, that if you are cutting matless and your bottom margin is like up here, if you hit center to page, it's still going to center at this point. So you may have to make adjustments for that, but not a big deal. For most of you, this will work. You are basically ready at this point to print and cut. I'm going to show you in another video how to pull out elements that you want to use without having to print the whole thing. I personally am a fan of this. I am notorious for slicing up cut files in order to pull out exactly the bits that I want. But for today, we're going to assume that you wanted to print these sheets together, and all you have to do at this point is print. So if you go to your print symbol up here, it should bring you up a print preview, and then again you're just going to print based on your printer settings. So whatever works best with your printer, depending on the brand and how you have it set up to print, you're going to do that. All you really need to do is make sure that your cut line here has got everything in it. So if that bottom margin here is sticking out below this square, you're going to want to fix that and bring it up a little bit. But mine looks fine, so I could print just like this. All right, we're going to pretend that we have printed, and we are going to go on to the next step, which is cutting. So you're going to click this send button here. There are a number of ways that you can do this. I prefer to cut on the line tab here. I just find it easier, and that's what's going to do your kiss cut and pop cut differently, but it is up to you. If you notice here, even though if we go back to design, you can see that there are red kiss cut lines and then the pop cut line is blue. If you cut on simple, it's going to show it all as red, and it's not going to let you choose different settings for those different cuts. That's fine. If you like it that way, you can go ahead and cut that way. I like to cut on the line tab because that lets me choose different cut settings. And what I do with that is just choose the settings that work best for me. Obviously, right now, this is on a matless kiss cut setting. It's one that I set up. You would choose whichever one is best for you. They do have built-in sticker paper settings. I don't like them. I find that I have to modify them quite a bit to cut properly. And then, of course, you have to adjust as your blades dull out. If you're cutting with a mat or without, all of that stuff. So I recommend figuring out which ones work best for you and going from there. But all you need to do is choose your cut settings. So I have one called Kiss Cut, and then I have another called, this one's called Outside Cut. And that's just going to tell it to pop this sheet out entirely. And then obviously the red lines are kiss cuts. That is a Frenchie. From there, all you have to do is hit send and you are good to go. Well, I guess load your mat, pop your mat into the machine, and then hit send. And that's it. If you're finding that it is not, the cut settings aren't to your satisfaction, the beauty about having printables is that you can print another and try it out. But I do recommend trying that out with your sticker paper before you get deep into printing and cutting, because you may find out afterwards that they did not cut all the way through, did not cut at all of that stuff. So troubleshoot that stuff before you go gung-ho and cut 100 sheets and then find out that they were cut wrong. In terms of other tips for cutting with silhouettes, like I said, they're all so different and so picky in their own way, and the advice that you get from different people is going to be completely based on their experiences with their cutters. So I know that a lot of silhouette users swear by having direct light on their machine so that it has more light to read these marks. I find the complete opposite. My machines are divas of darkness. They require, they honestly cut best if they are in complete darkness, but direct light on them totally messes up the cut set, like the cut on it. And in my mind, that kind of makes sense. It's like a little optical eye looking for something stark and on the sheet, and I think the light just adds too much of a reflection for it, at least for my machines. It is entirely possible that is completely non-scientific, but that is the experience I've had. The other experience I've had is if my margins are at 3.75 for the inset up here, sometimes I do need to move the sheet a little bit down on the mat for it to have enough space because it starts reading too late. So if you move the sheet down like even a 1/4 inch or so at the top, you may have more success doing it with the 0.375 inset. And I only mention that because the narrower the margins, or I guess the wider the margins, I don't even know, the smaller they are in terms of actual space on the page, the more you can fit on the page. So little tip there for you. But that's it. That's all it takes to print and cut with my Silhouette files. If it's like a one-off file, like a script sheet or something like that, I may put the sheet into the cut file for you before I upload it. But if it is not there, then that all you have to do is drag it in like that. You're good to go. Okay, let's move on to Cricut. So the first thing that I want to say is it has been a while since I owned a Cricut. So some of the finer details in Cricut Design Space may have changed a little bit since I regularly used it, but the process of importing the files and making sure that they are sized properly to print and cut, I believe is the same. So I want to show you what is different about these Cricut files than the Silhouette ones. So if you open the Silhouette PNG, you get a document that looks like this. If you open the Cricut equivalent, you get a document that looks like this. Now let's make that a little smaller so we can compare the two. Good enough. So on this one, you have a bleed. And if you remember in Silhouette Studio, the cut lines are inside of that box, which gives you space for, it's just a margin of error basically, so you don't end up with a white line outside of the cut line if it's a little bit off. It's just a bleed to make it easier and more consistent. So you have that in here. On the Cricut file, anywhere you see the dark gray is transparent. So it's basically what it's done is take all of the extra bits, including the white around it, and cut them out to make space between them. And that is how Cricut Design Space determines what to cut, or the Cricut itself determines what to cut. It needs that space around it to know, okay, here are the borders of what I'm cutting. I believe there is a way now to do a little bit of a bleed or an offset with it. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, so I'm not going to get into that, but I do provide the PNGs in what I believe is still the easiest way to do Cricut files. Again, if you know differently, drop that in the comments below. So we've got our quote unquote cut out file here. You'll also notice that there is a white rectangle around the entire thing. Think of that almost like the pop cut, because it's actually created with the pop cut line. So it's just defining the outer edges of the sheet the same way that the white background does on this one. So the dimensions remain the same, and you can see here that they do indicate the same thing. Those dimensions are necessary to have on this one because Cricut Design Space will upload it at a huge size, and then you have to resize it. So you need to know what it is. You also have to have that outside line in order to define it, because if it was just say like this here and it cut off right at the end of that and you set it to 7 inches wide, it's going to make it 7 inches from here to here instead of here to here. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll show you once we get in there. So let's close those down. We're going to open Cricut Design Space and we're going to go up here to New Project. That's going to open the canvas for you. And what you want to do here is click Upload, which is second from the bottom. And then we're going to click Upload Image here, and we will drag and drop those full boxes into it. Now, these options here are a little bit more important when you're trying to pull items out of it. So if you've uploaded like a white background file, like the ones for Silhouette, it'll try to pull out the non-white background parts basically, and you can tell it whether it's, you know, simple or complex. I usually just always hit complex, find it's the easiest one, and then hit continue. All right, that has pulled it up there. There is also a background remover here, but you do not need to use that. And then you're going to click apply and continue. Now here, it gives you two options. This is basically the cut file, right? It's gonna cut all of these squares, or sorry, these rectangles out. However, we want to print this first so there's something pretty on the page, so we're gonna choose this one. Times where it might not matter would be more if you are doing like vinyl, where it doesn't matter where it's placed on the page, but you want to print exactly what is on here. So you're gonna select that and then click upload. You can also name it here if you want to be able to find it easily afterwards. All right, so that has uploaded. We're just going to click this file and then click add to canvas here. So if we look at this and we put this right at sort of the 0 mark here, it is 14 inches by, this is a little bit more than 8.5, but it is 8.5. We just haven't lined it up properly. So that is how big it's brought it in as. If you were to print this and cut it like this, each box would be like twice the width that it needs to be, right? Because right now each box is 3 inches by 4 inches high. So clearly that's going to be enormous. What you're going to do is the exact same process that you would have done in Silhouette Studio for resizing. If you have to, you're always going to go by this size here. We're going to click the unlock proportion button there, and we're going to change the width to 7 and the height to 4.25. Now, it's going to do that when you first put in the 7. Don't worry, just hit enter when you have the 4.25 there, and that is going to make it look right again. So now if we pull this up here, you can see that it starts on the 3 and ends at the 4.5. So it is 1.5 inches wide, which is what we want. Now, the print and cut area for Cricut is a little bit smaller than it is on Silhouette. So you may not be able to fit 2 of these per page. The way that I used to figure that out when I used a Cricut was to create some kind of box on the page with the dimensions of the print and cut space, which is 9.25 by 6.75. So if you just go to shapes and hit the square, it's going to create one here for you. Just move it over. You're going to unclick this again, and we said 9.25 by 6.75, so I'm actually going to make it the other way around because otherwise it's not going to fit on my sheet. And I'm going to figure out, you can move this to the back, and you used to be able to lock it, but I don't know if you can anymore. So I won't worry about that. Now I'm just going to play around until I figure out how much I can fit on the page. So it might involve rotating it. All right, rotate is over here. So if you rotate this, just do it 270 and then it'll put it 90 degrees counterclockwise basically. And then you can line it up wherever you want. Now, obviously you're not going to be able to get 2 of these sheets on one print and cut canvas, especially with Cricut. It's a lot smaller than Silhouette, but you could put other things here if you wanted to. And like I said, that tutorial that I'm going to do, maybe the next one actually, about cutting things out of sheets to make them fit the spot you want them to fit and also not print and cut the things that you know you're not going to use. You would be able to pop some of those in here. And then what you do, if I remember, because again, it's been a while since I used Cricut, but if I remember correctly, all you have to do then is weld them or attach them or something like that to get them to stay in that position. Because right now, so this is in the middle of the page, it's got a gray rectangle behind it. If you go here, it's gonna try to put them on different mats because it's not understanding that it should be one thing, right? So this is like that gray rectangle, and you can turn things around on here and, you know, rotate them and such. But if you just, I don't know if it's attach, it might be attach, essentially grouping them all together so it thinks it's one element, then you can control where on the page they go. And basically what Cricut does is take all these spaces in between and ignore them and just cut around the actual like artwork parts or the sticker parts. So it knows that this rectangle here is a sticker that it needs to cut. There is a built-in bleed option with Cricut. So if we delete that and we go to make it where it says print and cut, and then these lines here, this rectangle is the print and cut, like the registration marks for the Cricut. I believe if you click continue and then send to printer, you can choose here add bleed, and what that does, I don't know if it shows you on here, I don't believe it does, it adds a bit of a blurred space around it so that it's, again, not cutting white space. Like I said, there is a way to add an offset when you're creating things in Cricut. I don't think you can add an offset like this, but I used to use this add bleed option and it was fine and worked very well for me. So you would print it, and then obviously it's telling me that I would need to connect an Explorer or like a Cricut machine for it because there's no device found. If yours is already hooked up, then you would just need to choose the settings that you wanted. On the Cricut, at least the one I had, I don't know if it's still this way, you select the material on the machine, and the vinyl setting it's the one that I always used for Kiss Cut. I don't know if you can now do a pop cut with Cricut without designing it in Cricut Design Space, but it was not a possibility when, like, just to do it the way that I've shown you. So you would have to play around with that a little bit and figure that part out. It has definitely gotten more robust in the last few years, but I don't know exactly what capabilities it has. I do know though that using these settings will give you what you need for printing and cutting. All right. So that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you learned something. If you have questions, drop them in the comments down below. If you are watching as part of the replay, let us know as well. And I will see you all again soon for another Just a Tip Tuesday in a little while. Bye, friends.